Welcome to Veiled Narratives, where every untold story finds its heartbeat, and every broken moment blooms into something unforgettable. Today's story reminds us that sometimes, the universe replaces pain with something far more extraordinary. Let's begin. The evening was painted in gold and rain. Soft jazz played through the speakers of El Aurora, the city's most exquisite rooftop restaurant, where crystal chandeliers swayed gently above tables dressed in white roses and candlelight. The kind of place where every detail whispered elegance, and every heartbeat carried an expectation. Amara sat near the edge of the glass terrace, her silk dress glimmering under the soft reflection of city lights. She had chosen that dress carefully, midnight blue, with a neckline that made her feel confident, radiant, ready. Her hair fell in waves across her shoulders and her lips were painted the color of wine. She checked her watch. 7:45 p.m. He said he'd be here by 7, but she told herself to stay calm. He's probably stuck in traffic. He always is. A waiter approached with a gentle smile. Would you like me to pour the champagne? Ma'am. She hesitated, then nodded. Just one glass, thank you. The bubbles rose slowly in the crystal flute, just like her fading hope. Around her, couples leaned closer, laughter echoing against the backdrop of rain hitting glass. The world seemed wrapped in warmth, except for her table, where the second chair remained painfully empty. Another message notification blinked on her phone. Her heart leapt. It was him. She opened it, smiling nervously, until her face froze. Sorry, something came up. Let's do this another time. Adjust that. No, I miss you. No apology, no effort. It felt like a blade, clean and silent. The waiter returned, noticing her untouched glass. Would you like me to bring the main course now? She shook her head, forcing a polite smile. No, actually, could you just pack it to go? He nodded respectfully, but his eyes betrayed the kind of sympathy she didn't want. The kind that said, I've seen this before. As he left, Amara exhaled shakily, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. She stared at the city below, millions of lights flickering like promises, some bright, some dying. How strange, she thought, that a person could plan so much for someone who couldn't even show up. Her fingers traced the rim of the glass. The warmth that once filled her chest, that anticipation of love, of being chosen, had cooled into something hollow. A soft voice played in her memory. You always expect too much, Amara. She smiled bitterly. Maybe he was right. Maybe expecting consistency was too much. The rain intensified outside, sliding down the glass in silver streaks. Each drop seemed to mirror her disappointment. Beautiful, but heavy. She gathered her clutch, preparing to leave. The air smelled of roses and regret. But before she could stand, something stopped her. A reflection in the glass across from her table. For a moment, she saw herself not as a woman abandoned, but as a vision, poised, elegant, glowing softly beneath chandelier light. And in that instant, she realized something profound. She didn't look like someone who'd been left. She looked like someone who deserved more. Still, pain has its own timing. It lingers. It hums beneath the surface of grace. The waiter returned with her packaged meal. Would you like an umbrella, ma'am? She smiled faintly. No, I'll be fine. She stepped into the rain. The city greeted her with shimmering reflections, and each raindrop cooled the heat of her heartbreak. Her heels clicked softly against the marble entrance, echoing like a quiet farewell. Amara didn't know it then, but this walk through the rain wasn't an ending. It was a transition. Somewhere, destiny was rearranging itself. Somewhere, eyes she hadn't yet met would soon recognize her worth instantly. The kind of recognition her ex never gave. And somewhere under the same rain, a man named Ethan Vale, a millionaire with a heart full of quiet storms, would glance toward that same restaurant and see her silhouette disappear into the mist. He would remember that moment for a long time, even before he knew her name. Because sometimes love doesn't begin with attraction. It begins with recognition. The rain had slowed to a quiet rhythm, soft, deliberate, almost musical. As Amara stepped out of the grand glass doors of El Aurora, her umbrella was small, barely shielding her, but she didn't care. The city shimmered beneath streetlights, each reflection on the pavement glistening like fragments of her forgotten dreams. She crossed the marble steps slowly, the echo of her heels fading into the night. Her phone buzzed again, a name she didn't want to see. She ignored it. Her heart felt heavy, yet her posture remained graceful, the way women carry strength even when it trembles. A sleek black car pulled up beside the restaurant. Its door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, commanding, yet with the quiet air of someone who understood solitude. Ethan Vale. He was known in business circles as the mind behind Vale Enterprises, the kind of man whose signature could shift markets. But tonight, he wasn't the CEO the world saw in magazines. He was simply a man seeking silence. His dinner meeting had been cancelled last minute, and he'd stopped at Aurora for a solitary meal. Yet, just as he was about to enter, he noticed her. A woman in a midnight blue dress, standing alone under the awning, her eyes fixed on the rain as if trying to wash something away. There was something about her stillness that drew him in. It wasn't sadness that caught his attention, it was grace, the kind of quiet grace that demanded reverence. Inside, Amara returned to the table for her forgotten scarf, soft cashmere, ivory white, resting against the candlelight. When she picked it up, a voice behind her spoke, low, calm, and certain. "He'll regret losing you." She froze. Slowly she turned. Ethan stood a few feet away, his suit perfectly tailored, his expression unreadable, eyes deep, steady, and filled with that rare kind of empathy that didn't pity but understood. For a moment, she couldn't find words. "Excuse me," she managed, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled faintly. "Forgive me. I didn't mean to intrude, but I saw you earlier waiting. You looked like someone who gave their best to someone who didn't deserve it." Amara blinked, unsure whether to be offended or moved. "You shouldn't assume things about people you don't know." "I don't need to know you," he replied gently. "Your silence said enough." His words carried weight, not arrogance, but wisdom. They fell into the air between them like soft rain, steady and healing. She tried to look away, to escape the intensity in his gaze, but there was something magnetic about it. It wasn't lust, it was recognition. He stepped closer, his tone softer now. "Let me buy you a cup of coffee. No strings, no motives, just a conversation between two people who didn't expect to cross paths tonight." And Amara hesitated. Everything in her told her to say no, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe fate, whispered yes. They sat by the window, the same one where she had waited hours ago. Only now the candlelight seemed warmer. Ethan studied her quietly. "You know," he said after a while, "when people leave, it's not always a loss. Sometimes it's a filter, showing who was never meant to stay." Amara smiled faintly, sipping her coffee. "You sound like someone who's been left before." He chuckled softly. "You don't build an empire without losing a few hearts along the way, including your own." His honesty startled her. There was no mask, no performance. Just truth, elegant, unguarded. They spoke for hours, about dreams, disappointments, art, and the strange comfort of strangers. He told her how he built his first company after losing everything. She told him how she spent years trying to fix people who never stayed long enough to see her worth. The rain softened outside, and for the first time in years, Amara laughed freely. It wasn't forced, it was real. Ethan leaned slightly forward, his gaze steady. "You have a light in you, Amara. Don't ever let someone's absence convince you it's gone." She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world outside blurred. The rain, the lights, the city, everything disappeared. Only two souls remained in that moment, quietly understanding what words could never say. When she finally stood to leave, he rose too. "I don't know if I'll see you again," he said softly. "But I do know one thing. Whoever let you go will regret it." Amara smiled, not out of pride, but peace. Maybe that's what healing feels like, when you no longer need them to. She walked out into the night, her scarf fluttering in the wind. Ethan watched her go, his heart strangely full. The kind of fullness that comes only when destiny whispers softly, "You were meant to meet her." The morning light poured into Café Elysian, an elegant corner hidden behind blooming jasmine vines. Its marble tables shimmered under sunlight, and the soft hum of instrumental music filled the air, the kind that makes time move slower. Amara hadn't planned to come, but something about that night, Ethan's voice, his quiet conviction, had stayed with her. His words, "He'll regret losing you," echoed not as arrogance but as truth, a truth she wasn't ready to face yet couldn't forget. She found herself sitting at a table near the window. The same kind of window she had waited by days ago. But today, she wasn't waiting for anyone. The waiter approached, smiling politely. "The gentleman said to bring this to your table." He placed down a single white rose and a folded note. Amara frowned slightly, opening it. In elegant handwriting, it read, "You left before I could say thank you. E.V." A small smile curved her lips. "Ethan Vale, a name she had only heard in passing, a man she hadn't expected to cross paths with again. Minutes later, the cafe door opened and the scent of rain followed him in, crisp, clean, magnetic. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, effortless yet striking, like someone who didn't need to try to command attention. When he saw her, his expression softened. "You came," he said simply, his voice carrying that calm confidence she remembered. "I didn't plan to," she replied, half smiling. "But then again, neither did I plan on meeting you at all." He laughed quietly, taking the seat across from her. Life rarely asks permission before changing everything. Their eyes met, and in that moment silence felt sacred. They talked about ordinary things at first: books, travel, art. But slowly, the conversation deepened. Ethan spoke of losing his mother early in life, and how her final words had shaped him. "Build something worth loving." Amara listened, captivated. "And did you?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "I built everything worth envying. But love, that's harder to build when you're busy proving you don't need it." His honesty disarmed her. Most men she knew wore pride like armor. But Ethan's vulnerability was his strength. Amara looked down at her coffee. "I spent years giving love to people who only borrowed it. I think that's worse." He leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle. "No, it's braver. The world breaks people like you first, the ones who love deeply, feel fully, hope endlessly. But when you heal, you glow differently, stronger, wiser." His words felt like sunlight after years of rain. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. Outside, the wind carried the scent of jasmine through the open windows, wrapping around them like a secret. The world seemed to hush, listening. Ethan reached across the table, not touching her hand, but close enough that warmth lingered between them. "You don't owe your softness to anyone who couldn't handle it, Amara. Keep it. But protect it. It's what makes you extraordinary." Her heart raced. Every word he spoke seemed to mend a fracture she hadn't realized was still open. "Why are you saying all this to me?" she asked quietly. He paused, his eyes holding hers. "Because I wish someone had said it to me when I needed to hear it." A silence fell, not awkward, but full, the kind of silence where two souls recognize each other's scars. Then Ethan smiled, breaking the spell. "Walk with me." They stepped outside into the soft glow of golden afternoon. The streets glistened from the earlier rain, and the world seemed painted in serenity. He matched her pace, unhurried, deliberate. They passed boutiques and art galleries, and finally stopped before a small antique bookstore. Ethan opened the door, the bell chiming softly. Inside, the scent of aged paper and mahogany surrounded them. He picked up an old poetry book from the shelf, Rumi, The Love Within. Turning a page, he read aloud. "The wound is the place where the light enters you." He looked at her, his voice deepening. "You remind me of that line." Amara met his gaze, something unspoken shimmering in the air between them, something fragile yet undeniable. She whispered, "Maybe that's what we both are. Two people learning to let the light in." For a moment, neither moved. The air was electric with quiet longing. Then Ethan smiled, slow, tender. "Then let's promise something. No more apologizing for being the light." Amara nodded softly. "Deal." As they stepped back into the golden street, she realized something. The ache in her chest had softened. Not because she had forgotten the man who left, but because she had met the one who reminded her she was worth staying for. The days that followed moved like poetry. Each morning shimmered with quiet anticipation. Each evening felt like a memory waiting to be written. Amara had returned to her work. The small art studio she ran on the edge of the city, but everything seemed touched by a subtle glow. Even the silence between brushstrokes felt lighter, as if Ethan's words had somehow found a permanent home in her heart. She didn't expect to see him again, yet fate has a way of weaving stories with threads unseen. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the studio, a familiar voice echoed softly behind her. "You paint emotions, not pictures." She turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, dressed in a tailored beige coat, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Her lips curved in surprise. "You found me." He smiled. "I prefer to think destiny guided me." He walked closer, admiring the paintings that lined the walls, abstracts of emotion, fragments of memory. One canvas, unfinished, caught his attention. A woman standing in rain, her reflection blurred, her posture unbroken. Ethan looked at it silently for a long moment. "She looks like she's waiting for something." Amara replied softly, "Maybe she's realizing she doesn't have to anymore." Their eyes met, and that single shared silence said everything words could not. He turned back to her. You know, I spend most of my life in rooms full of people pretending to listen. But with you silence feels honest. She felt her breath catch. It wasn't a compliment, it was confession. They spent the afternoon talking about art and music, about how success can feel empty without someone to share it with. Ethan confessed that despite his wealth, he often felt like an observer in his own life, surrounded by opulence but starving for authenticity. Amara listened quietly, her gaze soft. You've built a palace, she said, but maybe what you need is a home. He smiled faintly. Maybe I just found it. She looked away, her heart pounding. The kind of flutter that only comes when something real begins to bloom. The hours melted into evening. Golden light spilled through the windows, bathing the studio in a dreamy warmth. Ethan wandered to the window, watching the city below as the first lights began to flicker awake. You know what's ironic, he said, his voice low. People think success makes you untouchable. But the higher you rise, the fewer hands you have to hold. Amara joined him, standing close enough to feel his presence but not his touch. Maybe that's why the right connection feels so rare. Because it isn't built on who you are to the world, but who you are when no one's watching. He turned toward her, eyes darkened with something unspoken. And who am I now? She smiled gently. Someone who finally looks human. He laughed softly, the sound sincere. Then you're the first person who's ever said that and made it sound like a gift. For a long moment, they stood there. The city alive beneath them, but their world suspended in quiet gravity. Then Ethan's phone rang, breaking the spell. He silenced it without looking. She noticed the caller ID, a board member, perhaps, important, urgent, yet he stayed. Don't you have to take that? She asked. He shook his head. Some things can wait, this can't. Her heart melted. For a man who controlled empires, choosing presence over power was the most romantic act imaginable. As twilight deepened, he walked her home. They strolled through narrow cobblestone streets where lanterns glowed like fallen stars. Their hands brushed, once, twice, until finally, naturally they intertwined. No words, just warmth, just understanding. At her doorstep he paused. You've changed something in me, Amara. I don't know what yet, but it feels like peace. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering under the golden streetlight. Maybe it's not change. Maybe it's just remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. He smiled, the kind that carried both gratitude and yearning. You make even pain sound poetic. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the pulse beneath his calm. Maybe because pain isn't the opposite of love, it's where it begins. The night air grew still, charged with quiet electricity. Their eyes held each other. And for the first time, Ethan didn't think about tomorrow, or meetings, or expectations. He thought only of her. This woman who had seen beyond his wealth, his image, his armor, and touched the man beneath it. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You deserve a love that never leaves you waiting. Amara's voice trembled slightly. And you deserve someone who sees you before your name does. Their goodbye was unspoken. A look, a lingering moment. Yet it carried the weight of a promise neither dared to name. As Ethan walked away, he glanced back once. She was still standing there, framed by the golden light, the city behind her shimmering like a dream. He smiled to himself. So this is what connection feels like, he thought. Not possession, not attraction, but recognition. Winter arrived softly, dressing the city in velvet skies and candle-lit evenings. The wind carried the scent of pine and frost, and through the tall glass windows of Ethan Vale's penthouse, the skyline shimmered like a field of diamonds. He stood by the balcony, a glass of wine untouched beside him, his thoughts lost somewhere far beneath the glittering streets. The man who once thrived on meetings, mergers, and endless noise now craved only silence, her silence. The kind that had taught him peace. It had been 2 weeks since he'd last seen Amara. She had gone to the coast for an art retreat, needing space to paint, to breathe, to heal. He hadn't tried to stop her. Love, he'd realized, was not about patience. That night, his phone vibrated. A message blinked on the screen. Come to the gallery. Midnight. No signature. But he knew. The Luminae Art Gallery was empty when he arrived, save for the soft hum of ambient music and the warm glow of hundreds of golden lights reflecting off glass. In the center of the room stood Amara, surrounded by her paintings. Each canvas told a story of loss, of rediscovery, of transformation. One painting, placed under a spotlight, caught his eye. It was of a man and woman standing in the rain, their reflections merging into one. Amara turned, her expression calm, almost ethereal. "Do you like it?" Ethan walked closer, his eyes tracing every brushstroke. "It's beautiful. It feels alive." She smiled faintly. "It's called redemption." He looked at her. "Hose. Both," she whispered. "Yours and mine." The words hung in the air like a prayer. She walked to the window, her reflection blending with the city lights. "You know, when I started painting this, I was still angry. At him, at love, at myself. But somewhere between the colors, I realized I wasn't painting pain anymore. I was painting freedom." Ethan moved beside her. "And what did freedom look like?" Her gaze lifted to him. "It looked a lot like you." His breath caught, not because of the words, but because of the truth behind them. He took her hand gently, his thumb brushing against her skin as if memorizing the texture of something sacred. "Amara," he said softly, "I spent years believing redemption came from success, from proving I was enough. But the night I met you, I stopped performing. For the first time I was enough, simply by being." A tear shimmered in her eyes, reflecting the city's gold. "That's all I ever wanted someone to feel with me. Peace, not pressure. Safety, not fear." They stood in silence, their hands intertwined, surrounded by the soft symphony of their breathing. Then Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something," he whispered. "If life gave you the choice to relive that night, the heartbreak, the rain, the pain, would you change it?" Amara shook her head slowly. "No. Because without it, I never would have found you." He smiled, the kind of smile that comes from deep inside, slow and real. "Then maybe that's what destiny really is. The art of turning pain into beauty." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. She froze. Then, he opened it. Not a diamond, not something extravagant, but a silver ring engraved with delicate lines that resembled brushstrokes. "It's not an engagement ring," he said gently. "It's a promise. That whatever storm comes next, we face it together. No contracts, no conditions, just truth." Amara's voice trembled. "You always make the simplest things feel grand." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "That's because the grandest things in life are always simple. Loyalty, time, and love." They stood beneath the gallery lights, surrounded by art that spoke the language of their souls. He pulled her closer, her hands resting against his chest, his breath warm against her forehead. Outside, snow began to fall, slowly, silently, blanketing the world in white. Amara whispered, "You know, somewhere out there, he's probably wondering why he let me go." Ethan smiled, pressing his lips to her hair. "Let him wonder. Some regrets are meant to last forever." She looked up at him, eyes luminous. "And us." He met her gaze. "We're not a regret. We're the reason it all had to happen." Later that night, they stood on the balcony, the city glowing beneath them. She leaned against him, his arms around her waist, their reflections merging in the glass. Just like in her painting. Amara breathed softly. "It's strange how pain can lead you to the one meant to heal it." Ethan kissed her temple. "That's not strange, love. That's divine." The snow fell heavier now, swirling in patterns like painted silk, wrapping the night in silver serenity. Two souls, once broken by life's unpredictability, now stood whole, not because they completed each other, but because they reminded each other how to be complete alone. Sometimes, the universe breaks your heart, not to punish you, but to open it. Because only through the cracks can light enter. And through that light, we begin again. Amara's story began in disappointment. A woman left waiting at a table that once symbolized hope. But destiny had a different plan. It sent her not the man she expected, but the one she needed. Ethan didn't arrive to rescue her, he arrived to recognize her. The woman she already was, beneath the hurt, beneath the silence. What began as an evening of heartbreak became the birth of something rare. Love born not from perfection, but from understanding. Two souls who had walked through storms, found each other not in the sunlight, but in the rain, and stayed. Through each moment, the first spark, the quiet conversations, the unspoken care, they discovered that love isn't about ownership. It's about presence. It's not about who stays when it's easy, but who chooses you when it's dark. Ethan's redemption wasn't found in his success, and Amara's healing wasn't found in escape. It was found in truth, in the way their hearts learned to speak a language only they could understand. Because real love doesn't demand, it doesn't rush. It simply exists, softly, consistently, beautifully, like a heartbeat that never needed to be heard to be felt. And as snow fell that night over the glowing city, two souls stood together, not bound by promises or pasts, but by peace. She was left alone on a date, until fate sent her someone who saw her not as broken, but as a masterpiece waiting to be known. This was Veiled Narratives, where every story hides a truth, and every heartbreak hides a beginning. Because sometimes, the love that's meant for you simply arrives when you finally stop searching